Ancient China employed stringent and often cruel methods of punishment, leading to the widespread use of the term Chinese torture to describe exceptionally chilling situations encountered even in modern times. In a society that has long prioritized the preservation of harmony among its citizens, the punishments implemented range from permanent branding to excruciating forms of capital punishment. In this video, we're going to look at some of the most brutal punishments used in ancient Asia. The worst punishment for women. Women in ancient China were not exempt from severe punishments. They had their own set of tortures, which were just as harrowing as those endured by men. While it's true that certain punishments for women were relatively less agonizing, such as forced labor or finger pressing between two pieces of wood, it is important to note that women were not spared from extreme consequences. Depending on the severity of their crimes, women could even face the loss of their lives. One of the most excruciating tortures inflicted primarily upon women was the infamous wooden donkey. This torture apparatus comprised a triangular-shaped wooden structure supported by logs or sticks. Women found guilty of adultery were compelled to sit on this device for prolonged periods, resulting in permanent injuries that severely hindered their ability to walk without enduring intense pain. In order to intensify the punishment inflicted upon these women, additional weight was attached to their feet, exacerbating their injuries. Some versions of the wooden donkey were equipped with spikes on the sitting area, causing further damage to the affected body parts. Death by 1,000 cuts. One of the most dreaded sentences, inflicting unimaginable agony and considered among the cruelest punishments in human history, was known as Ling Qi, or death by 1,000 cuts. In ancient China, this punishment was exclusively reserved for the most heinous criminals, particularly those guilty of the so-called 10 abominations. Offenses such as treason, matricide, patricide, spousal murder, rebellion, and witchcraft warranted this slow and agonizing form of execution. The condemned individual would be tied to a post by their hands and feet. In some instances, a piece of opium was administered to partially alleviate the pain. Then, meticulously and gradually, the flesh of the prisoner's body would be cut away, akin to slicing a piece of beef, with the removed flesh being placed in front of them until they eventually lost consciousness and succumbed to death. The torture, both physically and psychologically, endured during death by 1,000 cuts typically lasted for approximately 20 minutes, which must have felt like an eternity for the unfortunate victims before losing consciousness. However, there are documented cases of individuals enduring the torment for an astonishing 12 hours before finally finding peace. In cases where the prisoner's family possessed significant resources, there was a possibility of bribing the executioner to swiftly deliver a fatal blow with the first cut, sparing the condemned from further gruesome suffering. This horrific practice originated in the 10th century and persisted until its prohibition in 1905, which means that we're just over a century removed from this haunting nightmare turned reality. The final individual to face this horrifying death sentence was an assassin who had committed the grave acts of murdering his employer and assaulting the empress. The execution designed for this individual was particularly macabre, spanning a horrifying 3-day duration during which all the skin was systematically removed from the condemned person's body. The 5 punishments for slaves. In ancient China, a system of 5 punishment categories was established with the purpose of maintaining social order and promoting harmony among the people. These punishments varied based on the gender of the offender, with the women generally facing less severe consequences due to the prevailing patriarchal societal norms that held them less accountable for their crimes. However, women who committed offenses such as adultery, murder, or witchcraft were subject to more sadistic forms of torture or even different variants of capital punishment, including death. Throughout various dynasties in ancient China, the punishments remained largely consistent. They were determined by the nature and severity of the crime committed, as well as the social category to which the offender belonged. Among the punishments for the men, the first and relatively less severe penalty involved tattooing the crime onto the offender's face, serving as a public display of their transgression. The size of the tattoo would vary depending on the seriousness of the crime committed. This particular punishment was predominantly applied to slaves who had fled from their masters or individuals found guilty of petty theft. The second level of punishments in ancient China involved the severe act of cutting off the offender's nose, typically performed without any anesthesia. This brutal punishment aimed to permanently impair the individual's sense of smell and sometimes hindered their ability to breathe through the remaining orifices. It was primarily reserved for those who had committed significant theft. In cases where the crimes were deemed even more heinous, the punishment escalated to amputating either one or both feet. Depending on the severity of the inflicted harm, this form of punishment sought to inflict long-lasting physical disabilities on the offenders as a consequence of their actions. Another variant of punishment involved opening the leg at the knee and removing the kneecap, rendering the offender permanently unable to walk. This severe penalty ensured a lifetime of mobility challenges as a consequence of their actions. In the second to last category of punishments, castration was employed. This sentence entailed the removal of a man's reproductive organs, resulting in his transformation into a eunuch. Eunuchs were then compelled to serve important or royal figures. Those subjected to this punishment were typically individuals who committed adultery or were involved in acts of corruption. As a final and most extreme measure, death in its various forms served as the ultimate punishment, particularly for mass murderers or those who betrayed the royalty. The influence of Confucianism played a role in the evolution of punishments, leading to the gradual reduction in the overall brutality during the period of Imperial China. However, death penalties remained prevalent as a significant form of punishment during that era. Torture of prisoners. In ancient China, the law played a crucial role in maintaining social order and harmony, guided by the principle of crime and punishment. Influenced by philosophies such as Confucianism and legalism, legalist thinker Han Feiji emphasized the ruler's sole possession and exercise of power. As a result, the legal code mandated that individuals must confess their crimes to receive a sentence. Voluntary confession led to reduced or even nullified punishments, with offenders only held responsible for compensating losses, except in cases of murder, bodily harm, or property damage. In cases where prisoners did not confess, alternative methods were employed. During the investigation, defendants were required to appear before an official who would pose simple questions. If the prisoners refused to answer, a basic form of torture was applied, involving the twisting of their arms around a post while they endured continuous beatings. There were also more elaborate and unimaginable techniques employed, some of which were rather exotic in nature and surpassed the boundaries of human imagination. One of the notable torture methods was the infamous bamboo torture, where the prisoner was positioned atop a bamboo plant, which would grow over time and gradually impale the individual. Another well-known method was the water torture, involving the continuous dripping of water onto the head of a restrained prisoner. As the water gradually penetrated through the skull, this process could last for days, often resulting in the person experiencing mental breakdown or insanity before physical injury even occurred. These torturous techniques often forced innocent individuals to falsely confess to crimes they had not committed. Today's execution vans. Currently, China surpasses all other countries combined in the number of executions carried out each year. Although the figure has decreased over time, it's estimated that over 1,000 criminals receive the death penalty annually in China, with 46 capital crimes that warrant such punishment. Until 1997, firing squads were responsible for executions, but later execution vans equipped with lethal injection capabilities were introduced to streamline the process and reduce costs. While death sentence proceedings in China resemble those in the US, the efficiency of these execution vans may make them a prevailing method in Chinese society, whether through innovative approaches or a potential return to past brutal public punishments. And that's a wrap for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more content. Thanks for making it this far, and we'll see you again in the next video. Have a good day.